Fran from our budget committee would like to start out and give you some figures that they have from the budget committee.
So I believe everybody in the audience has the mill rate worksheet. Over the last couple of days, we've kind of been taking a look at what the real impacts are before Calpine speaks. They're going to speak about all of the benefits and the impacts, but we really wanted to lay it out for ourselves to take a look at, where are we, what do we think the potentials are as we move forward. So it's kind of a busy sheet, so what I wanted to do is just take, no more than a minute here and really tell you what the impacts are, okay? So if we were to move forward with Calpine, year one, and they were 50% complete of the project, okay? The town would gain revenue of $433,000. Okay? If they completed the project in year two, the town would gain revenue of $867,000. For a total gain of the first 2 years of the project, revenue to the town of Greenwood of $1.3 million. Okay? In year three is when we would take a mill rate reduction. Okay, and the mill rate reduction would extrapolate to $185 per thousand deduction, per 100,000 deduction. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? I just kind of wanted to put it out there that that's the beginning phases of what, just on the revenue side of what the gains would be for the town. Now, Calpine's going to talk about some other gains and some other things I really have no idea what, all they're going to talk about. But from our standpoint, from the budget committee standpoint, okay, first year gain 433, second year gain 867 for $1.3 million, what I would call a windfall into the town, okay? If you think about what we would do with that, we would certainly just focus on fixing the infrastructure. We started a couple of years ago trying to put some extra monies away, okay, but nothing in this kind of, this kind of number. We're talking about putting monies away, 30 and 50,000 here and there, okay? $1.3 million to fix the overall infrastructure that we have in the town could be huge in an upgrade as we move forward, before everything else Calpine has to talk about. So I thought it was important to get that out there so that everybody understands it.
I have a question.
Shoot.
What was the number that you said per 100,000?
You would every taxpayer would gain $185 per 100,000. It would subtract by that. Okay, and that would happen in year three. Okay. That's all I got, sir.
Okay, then, now, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fowler.
Actually, I'll defer to Mr. Jarvis.
Okay, thank you.
Alec, do you want to use the microphone?
I'll talk loud enough, hopefully folks can hear me. And I think
It would be easier for us filming it though if it was up front.
I'll call on other members of our team here. So first, I just want to thank the selectmen and the budget committee for letting us speak today. I want to let folks know that we continue to be to develop the project here in Greenwood, are interested in moving forward. My hope at this meeting is we can provide some information that speaks to the economic benefits of the project.
Louder, please.
Louder, please.
Louder.
Microphone.
Use it.
Based on the information that we know today. So the numbers we want to talk about today are based on our assumptions of project size, our ability to permit the project, the appropriate turbines for the site. We want to go through today just our assumptions, and hopefully this will be a dialogue where we can get feedback from the selectmen and the budget committee to see if our assumptions match your assumptions. And we haven't had time to take a detailed look at your mill rate sheet, but I'd like to do that in the future. So one of the things we want to do is, and I'll explain what handouts that we have given to you today, is to walk through our assumptions about value, about tax revenue, about the impacts and tax shifts, and then feel free at any time we go through this, if there are questions about the individual assumptions, then we can address those. And really, my hope is that we're refining our understanding of the way the town thinks about future mill rate, depreciation, some big pieces that change or drive the value of a project like this. And so what we provided are a couple sheets. The handout that has all the bullets I'm going to speak to in a second is really the assumptions on value and tax shifts. And I want to talk about community benefit agreement, which is statutorily required for wind projects in Maine. So we'll talk about that value piece too. And then we have a spreadsheet that shows sort of, year 1 through 30 of the value and looking at depreciation. And I'll have some members of our team talk about that, so you can see year to year what happens. Does the board have all of this information in front of them? If not, we can make sure we do.
I don't have that spreadsheet.
Okay. You guys want to grab that?
You have some more.
I have your revised bullet statement.
I think they're going to grab it right now. Distribute that.
You might need a magnifying glass. There's one here.
While Dave's passing out that information, maybe it'd be helpful just to give a project update, just what we're doing locally. As most folks know, we have a meteorological tower off Ames Road, and we continue to measure the wind resource. We think it's a viable site. We have we now have 1 year's worth of data. We also have a SODAR unit that uses sound to measure the wind as well. We just continue to measure the data. We've been doing multi-year eagle, raptor, and bat surveys on the project area on lands that we have leased, so that's ongoing. And those are the two major activities that we're doing right now. So now does the board have the spreadsheet that I mentioned?
No. Alex, she'd like to change your stand because they can't hear as well.
Is the microphone not working, or I'm not speaking into it?
It's working, but you're not speaking.
All right. I've never been on,
That's a.
not a celebrity, can you tell?
Yeah, wait, we can help you out.
Thank you.
Okay, but you still have my number to call.
Give you a copy of the letter.
You want to cover it?
Thanks.
Have him come? Yeah. Test, 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
So, and I think I neglected to introduce the members of our team here. So, I'm Alec Jarvis from Calpine. I'm the development director for Calpine in the Northeast. Dave Fowler, do you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Dave Fowler. And I also help represent Calpine, and I've been working in the community for almost a year now. As most of you know, we have a Met tower that's measuring the wind as we speak, and that's really all we've done in the field to date, but other than some environmental data collection.
Hi, I'm Mark Bauer. I'm an attorney with the law firm Jensen, Baird, Gardner, and Henry in Portland, and helped to put together some of the assumptions and economic information that you've got today. I'm here to respond to any questions about that.
I'm Stephanie Fowler, and I'm also assisting Calpine with the project.
Okay, so I'm now reading from the project value and tax revenue projections sheet. So, we have to have baseline assumptions for value for the project, right? And today our assumption is that it'll be a 13 turbine project with 3.45 megawatt machines, and our total valuation based on our understanding of pricing and the cost to construct is $67,275,000. So this is our baseline number. If we, this number can be in flux depending on what turbine technology. Once we know more about the project and we're farther along into the design phase, our costs are be much more secure as we know more about the project and do more field work. But that's our assumption today. We received some feedback from the town on depreciation. So our methodology right now, our assumption is 5% depreciation annually until the total valuation reaches 50% or depreciates to 50% of that 67 million, as long as they're in operation. The next bullet is on mill rate assumption, so we're assuming 12.9, which would result in the gross new tax revenue for, this is year one, at 867,000. So that's just year one. That's without any sort of tax shift. So just want to make that point known. And that's one of the things that we would work through to make sure that we have the same assumptions that the town does.
I was just gonna say, we did pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
I got 867, 847, you got 867, 221. Okay.
And just to clarify that, when he says year one, we're looking at year three on
Well,
the
yeah, right,
spreadsheet.
yeah,
Okay.
no, right,
Yep.
right, I'm totally following.
Okay.
So another assumption is that we didn't assume a TIF district. This is really just straight, without a TIF. I will mention there is a column that's really, the numbers don't reflect a TIF, but there's a column that says with TIF, but it's really, in your spreadsheet, we're not assuming a TIF. So just pointing out that sort of correction on the spreadsheet. So the estimated gross new tax revenue assumes no TIF district, no sheltering of value. And one thing I think is important and we really want to emphasize is that there is, lost estate age to education, and we're showing an amount of 300,939. State revenue sharing in the amount of 9,141. This is with all the new value, the 67 million coming to town, and that the projections show that as well. So I think it's an important point to note that there are shifts, right? And then the last one I didn't talk about, just county tax of increase of 53,368 following the first year that we're in town. The net new tax revenue based on this 17-18 mill rate of 12.9 would be 500,000 in the first year. So that would be your net down from what I just talked about with gross, which is obviously a higher number. And so then based on the mill rate for year one, 12.9, our assumption, and this is again, an increase, I think based on historical data of 1.7 over time. So that's just from our understanding of sort of budgets in the past.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay.
No, right, yeah, we carried it, and on the sheets, years 1, 2, and 3, for the analysis, general analysis, just from the beginning here, we carried the 12.9, just in general. But really, because the revenue was coming in, right, so, if you get that much extra revenue coming in for the windfall, it would be, if your mill rate actually went up with that much inbound, I think everybody in this room would crucify us. So,
Right.
So, yeah,
It's
understood.
hard to project, right?
Right,
It's always hard to
absolutely.
project your mill
Yeah.
rate in the future. I do have an error on this page, the next bullet, or the same bullet. So that number is the gross number. So it should track on your sheet. The 657 is the gross number. The net's actually 423,889 after the shift. Or your average over that 30 years. And we just, we could look at 20 years, we could look at 25. We just chose to look at the longer term. So
Where are these numbers?
the one that I just mentioned, there was a mistake on the sheet. It was the very last. The very last number I mentioned, 657,000.
And that's an average that doesn't appear on the sheet. It was just for purposes of this summary, we calculated the average over 30 years, and like Alex said, we could, do it over 20 years or 25 years, whatever. We just happened to do it for 30 years, but that's the average number, gross. And then, as he said, there was a typo, my fault. The net number would be 423 based on it would be the number in the column that says net new tax revenue to town without TIF. At the bottom, you see it's 12,292,805. So that divided by actually 29 years, because year one there was no value. So that's how the average comes
Oh,
from.
that's the chart I don't have.
Okay. I thought that was.
I think it's
Some people have it.
No, it's not in the back.
okay.
It's
We can-
unavailable.
We
Okay,
can
so
make
we have
more
a
copies of
document
that.
that's not valid? Is that what we're looking at?
So, I think the important point I'm trying to make is that the net after shifts is 400, annually, we assume 30 years is, once the project were to come to town, is 423,889. But again, based on all the assumptions that, and our assumptions for today about the value. So I can stop there if we want to drill into any of these. The next page I want to talk about is the community benefits piece, or we can circle back at the end, up to the board.
I think you keep going. Our numbers are relatively close, you know, in the realm of the 70,000 foot view. I think we're in a pretty solid place, so.
Okay. The next thing I'd like to talk about is per Maine statute, wind projects, when they apply for a permit, have to fulfill a tangible benefits section in their application. And by statute, a developer has to propose a minimum $4,000 per turbine per year for 20 years. So that's written into statute for any wind project that's going to get built. And if all the projects that are up and operational today have that. A lot of, just to add some more detail, most projects have not done the minimum. Individual towns have negotiated TIFs in tandem with that piece. So some of those numbers are higher. I don't know of a project that has done just the minimum, but we want to show what that looks like at the minimum based on 13 turbines times 4,000 times 20. So that's on the spreadsheet as well. So I mentioned that. So the total there, which is just doing the math, would be 1,044,000 over the 20 years. So just that's really all I wanted to mention about the community benefits piece. If folks have questions about we can drill in, because there are other ways for projects to meet that requirement, but most projects have done a host community agreement with the town for that piece. Because you can also do conservation. So the idea being that you would buy a piece of property and you would put it into a conservation easement, and then there'd be evaluation of that parcel. So that's another option as well. And then there's the third option to fulfill this requirement is reduction in electricity rates, but that tends to be a much harder box to check for projects like this. So most projects have done the community benefit agreement with the town at a negotiated dollar amount, and typically for a 20-year term, which matches the statute.
So the way that you phrased that, I would, because you used the word propose, and then you did bring in the electricity, let's call it credit, okay, then you would be open to negotiations on that point.
It's typically with negotiation with the town.
Yeah,
right. Per statute, the developer chooses which box and bucket, and because you'll show in your application, a DP will make a finding that you have fulfilled that requirement. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's typically a negotiation with the town.
Just add a couple things. So Al can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the past, what he just described is the absolute minimum, but almost every project Alec and I have worked on, we've included a CPI index, inflation rate, on that community benefit. So it's not static at $4,000 a year for 20 years.
Yeah, I reviewed your contract on the community benefit. I didn't see any of that in there. That was one of my questions, that it seems odd that that's not on the contract, at least your boilerplate contract.
The contract we have with the other clients, or just the one that we provided is a draft.
It's a boilerplate, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of, I got to see a red on that already, so
yeah,
that's for a different time.
Yep, exactly. But I just wanted
to his point, we have included the CPI
and then the other option. I think on the electricity side, I think that the Angus King's project is the only one that really tackled that. The other ones all the other communities that we've worked in have chosen to take the cash. They've all had different ways of which they've distributed it. Most recently in Oakfield, they actually gave back cash. They just wrote checks. They divided it up by the members of the community and wrote checks. So there's a multitude,
I did that with
multitude
this,
of,
but it only came out with, at 4,000, it comes out to $47.27.
Yeah, right,
So, I mean, sorry, but it's probably not worth our time to write checks for that.
Yeah,
However, we could get into a conversation about adjustment of the mill rate, and an agreement of the adjusted, what the mill rate adjustment would be, against the community benefit, to make the community benefit large enough to be able to facilitate an electrical buyback project, if you want to call it that, against, and I need to know if you guys are willing to discuss that type of situation.
Everything, yeah, yes, we are.
Everything's on the table. Cool.
And Dave's example with Oakfield is, you negotiated with a TIF, side by side with a TIF, and smaller population, larger project, 48 turbines, so, yeah. And
I
not
will
the minimum.
state for the audience that I'm not for the TIF, okay? I think the 1.3-ish of a windfall into the town to help fix all of the infrastructure as we've driven over the last 3 to 5 years in the budget committee to start trying to help that. Certainly with the fact that everyone in the town has voted for the 2 municipal grants to be able to pave roads with is an indicator to me that to be able to take that money and spread it out through the entire town is certainly a big benefit. So.
So one question I have, if the board, would they like to go through the spreadsheet, in detail, column by column, to see how that, how the shifts happen, or, would you just like us to answer individual questions about our assumptions of the project, or, happy to kind of take direction from the board on how, because we want to, present this information, as the economic benefits that we see accruing here.
Don't looking at me again.
How much time we talking? We don't
I
want
mean,
to pay you all
I
night.
have more questions.
So we got more questions.
Oh yeah, I got more questions.
Well, enough.
So, I took the assumption of a 2-year build. Okay, so really, what is the implementation schedule? Is it over 24, 36, 48? What is that? And the real driver there is, for the tax revenue side of the fence, what would that look like? I'm sure it's, I'm sure it's in your pro forma. So how does?
Well, I think a couple of the assumptions are, when do you start the project, right? Depending on what tax year you're in and when the value actually arrives to town, right? And the turbines being the most the valuable components. I think most projects, much larger size projects, take typically a year. So it's not unreasonable to think, we're in a 12, less than 12-month build cycle. But again, it depends on, your winter start, right? But with a 13 turbine project, you do your tree clearing, possibly in the winter, and then, pour foundations in the summer, commission and decommissioning, commission and energize by the end of the year. So 12 months is pretty realistic.
The whole decommissioning situation from a 70,000-foot view.
Sure.
You use a 20-year contract on the economic benefit package, yet you talk about 30 years as you started kind of running around here with the sheet and so forth. So what is the end date if there is one, and what does that look like, the decommissioning?
So it'll be a permit condition of the project approved by DEP, and we'll have to, as part of our application, we'll provide methodology how we calculate what's the value, or what does it cost to decommission. That'll have to get approved by DEP. We'll have to post an LC or have a bond or a parental guarantee for the amount we assume it takes to decommission the project. And typically what happens is, and it's different for every project, but the conditions will be phased as far as fully funding that that decommissioning fund. So the other examples, and maybe have more specificity about on certain project, but year one X amount, and then incrementally to get to the full cost of decommission year 5. And some other jurisdictions have full funding year one, but that's what we've seen on past project is a phased funding of that LC or bond up to that amount.
I'm not sure you can answer this one, but it is related, and that's the tax revenue from the electricity generated that will pass through the town, because it's not coming to the town. So is there revenue generated from the fact that that electricity is moving through the town?
No, I mean, there's,
And it might be a Tim, it might be our lawyer question, it might be an MMA type of question. I just, it's one of them questions where solar, like in Fairfield, they're getting paid for that pass-through.
I mean, if you,
Fairfield. So how does that not,
and I'm not sure about that example, but if you had a power purchase agreement with the project, then yes, you could negotiate a rate and have a reduction in your electricity, your usage for the town. But, we're of a size that we're wholesale generator of electricity. And so what we said, most likely selling to a large utility. I mean, you could see, and this would be hard, I'm not like an electrical engineer, but reduction in cost because of either A, we pay for all the upgrades we needed, so, to have a net zero effect on reliability of the grid. So we're going to be, there'll be new hardware that we purchase and to be able to interconnect, and or just the reduction because you have a fuel source which is carbon free that there's no cost to the wind. So wind acts as a hedge compared to the other energy sources. So, but that's a couple degrees of separation for reduction locally, right? We're tying into the high voltage transmission grid. So there's no direct link.
Okay, that's good.
Unless you do it like I talked about with the community benefit, or the tangible benefit section where you have a program.
Yeah, right, I'm already there on
Right.
that side of the fence. This
Yeah.
was really just, is there revenue capture there that we're not aware of, from your standpoint if you've seen it? So that's really where that question lies. I'll put my pen down.
What happens if Calpine should go bankrupt sometime during this 20-year period?
Yeah, so there's I don't know if Dave wants to talk about this one. There's examples of that here in Maine with Sun Edison, and these projects have a lot of value. It is most likely someone else would, all those permit conditions and all those leases and all those agreements with the town would be in full force and effect. In a situation where it was operational, there would be a new buyer, and that's exactly what happened with Oakfield and the Bingham project. It was Sunhead went through bankruptcy, and the new owners are now Novus. And there was, I don't know, Dave, you have anything to add there?
Sure. Yeah, so as Alex said, as long as it stays operational, regardless of who the ownership is, it would stay running and operating as usual. Anybody, whether it's bankrupt or not, they're going to be bound by all the agreements that were put in place, including any agreement that's with the town. So those agreements would be binding. Now, if it was to go bankrupt and stop operating, it would trigger the decommissioning. Decommissioning is, being tackled by both the state on their regard, but also by your current ordinance tackles decommissioning, as well as the committee that's working on a proposed amendment is also tackling decommissioning. So you've got it in place as it is now under your current wind ordinance to handle the local question to that, and you also have the state. Does that answer what you were looking at, or?
Well, I don't know if I believe it. Wholehearted.
Which part?
The part that we would still get the money. I mean, you're saying, okay, if one company goes bankrupt, then somebody else is gonna jump in and take over. How do you know that?
Well, you'd have to you're right. I mean, if they don't honor the agreements, then you gotta take them to court, but it has happened. I work for Sun Edison, which it did happen with, and all of those were taken over, and they're still operating as they were. It's been 2 years plus now, and all of those agreements are still in full force with Hancock County, Somerset County, the town of Oakfield, and several other communities. And they've honored all of the community benefit agreements. Everything has been paid to date. So, I mean, that's my experience to date. Yeah.
Do you want me to run through the sheet?
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Recently in the news, the Northern Pass got the bid for the Boston Power, and Calpine didn't get it. So, what's your plans for the future of this? Who are you selling to? Is there somebody else that you're selling to? You say you're going on you're selling wholesale, but originally it was going on this trunk line that goes right straight down to Boston. So what happens there?
Well, there's no change to our thinking about where it's going to interconnect. So we would interconnect to the CMP 115 kV line here in town. With respect to Northern Pass, that's still, they actually didn't get their siting permit, and so they're reevaluating. So it's that process is not completed. So yes, Northern Pass was awarded all of it. There were 46, I think, projects all from New York and New England that bid in. So they're an opportunity, and not just the state of Massachusetts, but Rhode Island, Connecticut. There are multiple utilities and states that want to fulfill their renewable portfolio standard obligations, and so there's quite a bit of demand. So
Who pays you?
So there'll be the utilities, right? So it's a contract for renewable energy credits and electricity, and so that's what that bid. All those folks who bid in, including us, had a price that we bid in. So including Northern Pass. So I guess my other point is that there's a lot of demand for renewable energy. So that is just one opportunity that we are looking at.
So CMP pays you?
In most cases, what the Massachusetts RFPs, for example, that's actually the Massachusetts utilities, right? So that's Eversource and the Western Mass, Unitil.
National Grid.
National Grid.
But there are a lot of opportunities for the economic stream for this, though. I mean, I'm working on another project. It's not Calpine's, but General Motors just recently bought all of the power for a 150 megawatt project for 20 years. So I mean, Walmart's buying it. There are corporations, Amazon. There are large corporations who want to change their renewable footprint and get off fossil fuels, and they're purchasing it. So utilities have typically been the source in which the revenue stream has gone, but it has opened up tremendously. So that's another opportunity as well. And those opportunities are there regardless of above and beyond what just happened with the Clean Energy Act of Massachusetts.
You've got a $5 million per turbine. Is there a relative cost per height turbine?
No, is the question so that the larger turbines cost more? No,
In essence.
it's actually sort of per kilowatt less, the bigger nameplate or the larger machine. So and that's just an aggregated number. So the assumptions there are, as you look at that number per turbine, is everything, right? Your roads, your substation, your operations and maintenance, all your collection line, that whole cost. So
What would you take out of that for the cost of the turbine?
I mean, typically turbines are 60 to 70% of the cost of a project. So did the board want to go through that spreadsheet or just ask additional questions? We're happy to do whatever.
Well, most of us don't have a spreadsheet, so it wouldn't be much good to go through it. Gentlemen will answer that question.
Yes, if you're not able to do this project under the expedited approval process that the state set up before, if there's a change to that and you're not able to do it under the streamlined expedited approval, are you going to still go forward with the project?
Yeah. Yeah, it remains to be seen if that changes, but today all municipalities in Maine are afforded the expedited process. And what that really means is that If a project is appealed, currently it doesn't go to the Superior Court. It goes from Board of Environmental Protection to the lawful level.
But you also have to meet standards for
Louder,
scenic.
please.
You also have to meet the standards for scenic views. You have to take and look at the rural quality of place and rural characteristic. You also have to fit naturally into the environment.
Yeah, it depends on when we file an application to the state, and we will adhere to the visual standards and guidelines that are in effect at that time.
Milton, for example, with Everpower said that if they don't have expedited approval, that they're not going to move forward.
So that's a different scenario too, because Milton's unorganized, correct?
That's right.
Right, so 100%, I don't know the project very well, but I think 100% of that project is in the unexpedited territory. So it's a different,
Yeah, because we're not talking about
if
finance.
they're removed,
Okay,
it's a
so we'll
different
shut it
scenario,
down
permitting
for-
wise.
Yeah, I think, are there any more questions about finances or? Oh, over there, Kevin.
I'm looking through the spreadsheet here, which I wish you guys did have a copy.
We have it now.
Okay, good. I don't see anything in here about assumptions about the valuation of the property of the town going down. And if you look at wind projects around not only the United States, but all around the world, typically property valuations do go down. I think that should be factored in. And just doing some rough calculations based on the total value of the town, at 159,900 million, a 20% loss of valuation, you'd be losing $412,000 a year, roughly, in tax revenue. It may not happen overnight, but it's a process that I think will happen. And as somebody from out of state, if I was locating here for the first time and I saw a ridge full of windmills, I'd go look somewhere else. I think that should be factored into your spreadsheet.
I appreciate your point. I haven't seen any studies that show a 20% valuation drop with wind turbines after they come to town. We do have other information we can happily provide to the town about this topic, but I just respectfully don't agree with a 20% drop in valuation.
Well, we can provide you with some
Okay,
citations.
that would be great.
Right here on where Ireland, wind turbines negatively affect the value of property by varying amounts depending on the proximity of the individual house to the wind farm. 5 different studies that concur that this drop is between 11% to 40% for homes located within 2 miles of the wind farm. And from New Hampshire's recent proposals, realtors are working in and around the proposed route say sales of some second homes have ground to a halt. What they're seeing is a day-to-day basis of buyers choosing not to buy, says Andrew Smith, blah, blah, blah. The fear of the unknown is a huge impact right now, says Smith. The company represents over 20 properties that aren't selling because of the project, and few owners that needed to sell quickly had to do so at a deep discount. There's also wind turbine property loss.org, many more to let you know that this is what's happening. Property values are falling. That's going to be revenue to the town that's falling. It's also not to ever mention, because this is an economic meeting, any of the impact on the animals, the wildlife, the health of the people of Greenwood.
Yes, sir.
Just to follow up to their point, because I totally agree with it. It definitely has to be factored in, because what you're all forgetting here is that the properties that are going to be most affected by these turbines are mostly owned and bought by Massachusetts residents. And you know what Massachusetts residents think about wind farms. 10 years, that Cape Wind failed, didn't work. The Eversource contract that is just talking about right now, they want to run transmission lines through New Hampshire, that's failing. So you have to consider that without the Massachusetts buyers and the properties that would be selling to a minimal amount of buyers without Massachusetts residents, 20% is a no-brainer. These properties are going to drop plenty, and the tax revenue that these properties contribute to the town is about 70%. So it doesn't take an awful lot of a drop in that property revenue, property value, to eliminate your entire tax revenue that you're projecting. It'll be a break even at best, if not a loss.
The taxpayers, they're going to put in the infrastructure.
There's going to be no buyers. And it's pretty, the reason is because the properties that are gonna be affected is Mount Abram Ski Area, Round Pond, South Pond, and Twitchell. That's all non-resident properties, and buyers and sellers are mostly Massachusetts residents, and it's just not gonna work.
If this is a concern to the budget committee, Calpine's happy to also provide evidence that's to the contrary to that. And I would also suggest that you look at some of the other communities in the state of Maine, because a lot of the evidence is outside of the state of Maine, and there has been questions whether this impact is different in the state of Maine due to the tourism industry and whatnot. And you can look at Oakfield, even Mars Hill, where they've had some controversy, Lincoln Lakes area. I mean, there are very similar regions in the state of Maine that have wind power up and running now that you can get actual evidence in the state of Maine. But the Cal State Berkeley has done, I don't know how, it's got to be at least a 15-year study with multiple studies on that. And there has been definitely some from their studies, what Berkeley found was that, yes, during the course of construction, that uncertainty has had values dipped, but as soon as it was up and running, it disappeared. And there was absolutely no evidence that they could find real estate values going increase or decreasing related just to the wind farm, because there are so many variables associated with any area. So we'd be happy to provide those studies if that's of interest to the budget committee.
I've got one more question. Where is the nearest community with the type of wind turbines that you're proposing to build here, so the 600-foot one, so that we could compare valuation in that community before and after, because, so we can see that we're comparing apples to apples. Where's the closest industrial wind project with 600-foot towers?
So we haven't chosen a turbine yet, right? But that's a potential that the tip height is that high. So the Bingham project, East Bull
In Hancock County.
In Hancock County, they have towers that are over 100-meter towers. You know the tip height?
Yeah, within
100 meter.
No, sorry, that is the hub height.
400 or 600.
Hub height.
Yeah.
So what does that make the tip height? 450?
So the hub height would be the same as what he's proposing here. That the rotor diameter might be larger here than what's there. Those are only 107s, I think. I'd have to look.
We can provide that to
You'd have to provide that.
The best example. The tallest turbine in Maine is what you're looking for.
Right, or the tallest turbine in the Northeast, or,
Sure.
you know. I guess
Do
so.
you really care what you're doing to the area as far as ruining the sight, the sound of this pristine area?
No, they don't.
So Maine's a home rule state, right? You have full control, the town, to regulate and not have wind allowed in your town or not, right? We are interested in doing a project because, for multiple factors, but the decision, wholly rests with the state, but also here in the town of Greenwood to chart its own destiny.
I think the both of us will decide what to do, and that's the way it should be. Patty, you all set now?
I am, and you've got a lot of hands out there, I don't know what you want to do.
This
think you
was
should
for
hear
us,
us.
not. Public hearing.
Let's hear from Steve over there.
I want to hear from Steve.
He's gonna be affected a lot.
I'm not from Massachusetts. My family's been in this town for 200 years. Land was given to them as a grant, fighting in the war. You two need to come sit on my porch and then look me in the eye and tell me that Elwell and Tibbetts, covered with turbines, isn't gonna make my land worthless. That's where the conversation will start.
Can I go next? I'm just gonna read this whole thing. I'll skip by the
We
part.
aren't trying to hear the whole thing.
I just asked.
No, you've already had an opportunity to ask a question.
Okay.
To allow other people to ask questions.
Fine. Can I have a question? In regards to the revenue being put into the infrastructure of Greenwood, you're talking about wind turbines in the megawatt weighing more than 56 tons, blade assembly more than 36 tons, and the tower itself 76 tons, a total of 164 tons. How can this not be detrimental to the roads of Greenwood? If you were talking about the infrastructure and putting money back into the, you're talking about destroying them first. You're gonna need more money for your infrastructure.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?